joined now by Brian Hayes in studio, Frankie Corrado from his home office, and we got to tell you guys the rebuild inside the Montreal Canadiens launches Wednesday on Crave. It's an 8-episode behind-the-scenes docuseries from last season. So we got to ask you, do you think the Habs are ready to be done with the rebuild this season and ready to compete for a playoff spot?
No, I don't.
No.
I do not believe that that is the case. I think the fan base certainly is. I think the players would like to see that happen. Marty St. Louis would certainly like to see that happen. I think it's imperative they take a big step, but I don't think the playoffs are in their future this year. I still think this is probably the last chapter of the rebuild, but the last chapter is a very important one, right? You still have prospects that will likely join the team this year and more that will be coming in the future, but you have to establish winning ways and a winning culture. You have to make it imperative that these guys show up to the rink every day and realize we have to be pursuing 2 points. It's not about the future. It's not about development every single night. So I think they have to turn the page in terms of that approach, but I just think they're in a very difficult division. I still think they're young. I still think they're infusing youth into the lineup, and they're not quite ready to take that next step, which is actually being in the playoffs this season.
The playoffs seem overly ambitious for this group, and I would say that certain parts of the rebuild are done, but the rebuild itself still has a little bit of a ways to go. I would say there are still parts of this team that are on the teardown portion and not even starting with the rebuild. You know, you have guys like Slavkovsky, Suzuki, and Caulfield. Like, those are your guys you're going to be moving forward with. On the back end, there's plenty of young talent that you can pick and decide are going to be your guys for the immediate future. But there are some contracts that need to expire, and then you have some decisions to make as far as what you're going to do with that money. This year, they're going to have Savard, Armia, Dvorak. All those contracts are expiring, and at some point down the road here, Gallagher and Anderson. So while there still are parts that are a work in progress, there are some other parts that are done for this team, but I don't think that equals playoffs just yet for this group, although they do need to take another step and not be in the basement of the NHL.
Yeah, a couple of interesting sides to this. And then one of the biggest moves of the offseason was the Habs landing Patrik Laine. He said, you know, all the right things about playing in a big market like Montreal. So how do you think he's going to do playing in front of the fans at the Bell Center?
I'm not convinced it's going to lead to 40-plus goals, 45-plus goals, him getting back to where he was the first couple of years in the league. He has to prove that he can get back there, right? There were some lost seasons in Columbus. His last year and a half in Winnipeg, it really fell off for him. I also question who he's going to play with. Like Frankie said earlier, that Slavkovsky, Caulfield, Suzuki line, I'm presuming will stay intact. They're going to get a lot of ice, a lot of power play time. Who is Laine going to play with deeper down the lineup? Where does he set up in terms of the special teams? He has immense talent, but he had immense talent in Columbus. He had immense talent when he was in Winnipeg. It's about him proving he wants to play, he wants to be great, and I'm still in a position where I need to see that before I can project that it's actually going to happen, because I think he's used up a lot of those bullets, Frankie, earlier in his career. This is not a young guy. He's been in the league for 8 years now. He's not a kid. Patrik Laine has to prove, I'm a pro player, I'm someone to be reckoned with. And I think it's got to start immediately. I know he's got a couple of years on that deal, but he's got to hit the ground running in Montreal.
You're right, Hayes. It's not just a formality that because you're wearing a different uniform and you've had a change of scenery, you're just going to go out there and tuck 40 goals. It's not the reality. There's two things that it really comes down to for Patrik Laine. Number one has to be health. You know, above all else, he has to be ready and available to play, something he really hasn't been for the majority of his career. If he can stay healthy, then Marty St. Louis can start to do what he does best and develop players at the NHL level. We've seen countless examples of that. And if he's able to do what Marty wants him to do, maybe some things away from the puck, maybe getting involved a little more, moving his feet, not just waiting to have the puck before you try and get in attack mode. Like, if he really buys into the competitive spirit that the Canadiens are trying to play with, then maybe he has something going there. But he's going to have to stay healthy, and you can almost look at it this way. Sean Monahan went to the Montreal Canadiens. He was a very injured player. It took him 2 years to really get back to the level he was at when he was at his best. Patrik Laine has 2 years left on his deal. Maybe it's the same kind of timeline where this year, you know, it's getting your feet wet and, you know, getting back to being healthy. And then a year from now, we're talking about Patrik Laine really cementing himself as a 40-goal player. But it is going to be a work of progress for him as far as health-wise and doing what Marty St. Louis has in store for him.
Well, and right now we can take a look back on last year in the rebuild inside the Montreal Canadiens. That debuts Wednesday on Crave. The Habs debut this season on October 9th against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Guys, thanks.